welcome to 21st Century Literature from the Philippines and the world. For this lesson, we have two objectives. First, identify the geographic, linguistic, and ethnic dimensions of Philippine literary history, from pre-colonial to the contemporary. Second, value the contributions of literature on the language and culture of the Filipinos. Yes, you read it right. For pre-test, write PC if the important events and/or terms stated below are under pre-colonial literature, COL for colonial, and C if contemporary. You got this! Number 1. Chants or bulong, a repeated rhythmic phrase, typically one shouted or sung in unison by a crowd. It is also used in witchcraft or enchantments. Number 2. Christianity was proclaimed by the first colonizers. Number 3. Filipino films, comics, magazines, and other publications flourished during this time. Number 4. Education was the foremost contribution of the American occupation. Number 5. The flowering of Philippine literature in the various languages continue, especially with the appearance of new publications after martial law years and the resurgence of committed literature in the 1960s and the 1970s. Here are the answers for pre-test. Number 1, PC, pre-colonial. Number 2, COL, colonial. Number 3, C, contemporary. Number 4, COL, colonial. Number 5, C, contemporary. There you have it. Well done! Let's recall the definition of literature. You have learned that literature derived from the Latin word literatura, meaning writing, and from the word literatus, which means learning. It covers both oral and written forms of work. It also expresses permanent and universal ideas aesthetically. Philippine literary history from pre-colonial to contemporary period. It is necessary to trace the developments in literature during the significant periods in our history that shaped our identities as a nation, hailed as the Pearl of the Orient. Pre-colonial period. Pre-colonial literature is the literature of a formative past by the various groups of people who inhabited the archipelago. A literature of varying human interest close to the religious and political organizations of the ancient Filipinos. The verses were addressed to the ears rather than the eyes. These verses composed and sung were regarded as group property. Literary forms of pre-colonial literature. First, riddles or bugtong, which means battle of wits among participants. Example, 3 eyes have I, all in a row, when the red one opens, all freeze. The answer is traffic light. Second, proverb or salawikain, a phrase that gives advice and effectively embodies a commonplace truth based on practical experience or common sense. Example, laugh and the world laughs with you. Whip and you whip alone. Third, folk songs, a traditional or composed song typically characterized by stanzaic form, refrain, and simplicity of melody. Example, hele or oyayi, or also known as lullaby. Harana or serenade, ambahan for Mangyan, halusan for Ibatan, tagay for Cebuano. Fourth, chants or bulong. Used in witchcraft and or enchantment, chant may be considered speech, music, or a heightened or stylized form of speech. Fifth, epic, a long poem, typically one derived from ancient oral tradition, narrating the deeds and adventures of heroic or legendary figures or the history of a nation. Example, Lamang for Ilocano, Hinilawad for Panay, Kudaman for Palawan, Darangen for Mindanao. Sixth, legend is a genre of folklore that consists of a narrative featuring human actions perceived or believed both by teller and listeners to have taken place within human history. Example, Legend of Makahiya. Legend of Pasig River. Let's now have colonial period. Spanish colonization period. Characteristics of Spanish colonization. It has two distinct classifications, religious and secular. It introduces Spanish as the medium of communication. Literary forms. First, religious literature. It is divided into two, Passion and Sinaculo. Passion, long narrative poem about the passion and death of Jesus Christ. Sinaculo, it is the dramatization of the Passion. Second, secular or non-religious literature. It is divided into three, awit, corrido, prose narratives. Awit, colorful tales of chivalry made for singing and chanting. Example, Ibong Adarna by Jose de la Cruz. Corrido is a popular narrative song and poetry that forms a ballad. The songs are often about oppression, history, daily life for peasants, and other socially relevant topics. Example, Florante at Laura by Francisco Baltazar or Francisco Balagtas. Prose narratives. This form describes important events in life, either real or imaginary. The nationalistic or propaganda and revolutionary period. The propaganda movement was a period of time when native Filipinos were calling for reforms. The movement's prominent members were Jose P. Rizal, Mariano Ponce, and Marcelo H. del Pilar. The characteristics of this period planted seeds of nationalism to Filipinos. The language was shifted from Spanish to Tagalog. The literary forms during this time were propaganda literature, political essays, Diaryong Tagalog, and La Solidaridad. The political novels were No Limit Tangere and Il Filibusterismo by Dr. Jose Rizal. The revolutionary literature were political essays, example, Kalayaan, and poetry, example, True Decalogue, Katapusang Hibik ng Pilipinas, and Liwanag at Dilim. The American colonization period. The public school system was introduced by Americans to Filipinos. Thomasites were the first teachers during this period. English language was introduced and literary themes and motifs related to the people's search and desire to gain autonomy and independence as well, as relevant social concerns or political issues were exhibited in most works in both prose and poetic forms. Features of Philippine literature during American colonization period. In the early part of American occupation, Spanish, Tagalog, and other local languages were used and English was used as well. The use of first-person point of view in writing started to be popular. The comparison of urban and rural living became the common focus of the text. Short stories are most widespread literary form during this period. The Japanese colonization. During Japanese colonization, the journalistic writing was seized and placed under strict monitoring. There was no freedom of speech. Hence, the only Filipino writers who could write freely were those who were living in the United States. Most writers and authors were led to either go underground or write in Tagalog. Many wrote poems, short stories, plays, etc. The common theme of most poems during the Japanese occupation was nationalism, country, love, and life in the barrios, faith, religion, and the arts. There were three types of poems emerged during this period. First, haiku. It is a 3-line poem with 17 syllables written in a 5-7-5 syllable count, often focusing on images from nature. Haiku emphasizes simplicity, intensity, and directness of expression. Example, The Old Pond by Matsuo Basho. An old, silent pond. A frog jumps into the pond. Splosh! Silence again. Second, Tanaga or maikling tula. It is a Filipino style of poetry with 4-line stanzas with a syllable count of 7, 7, 7, 7 and a rhyme scheme of AABB. It expresses insights and life lessons. Example, Kaibigan ni Emilita Perez Baez. Ang katoto kapag tunay, hindi ngiti ang pag-alay, kundi isang katapatan ng mataos na pagdamay. Third, karaniwang anyo or usual form. The usual and common form of poetry. Noteworthy writers during this period. A few of the playwriters were Jose Maria Hernandez, he wrote Panday Pira, and Francisco Soc Rodrigo for Sapula sa Puti. Noteworthy writer of the period was Carlos P. Romulo, who won Pulitzer Prize for his bestsellers I Saw the Fall of the Philippines, and I See the Philippines Rise, and His Mother America and My Brother Americans. The contemporary or modernism period of the new society. Almost all themes in most writings dealt with the development or progress of the country, like the Green Revolution, family planning, proper nutrition, environment, drug addiction, and pollution. The new society tried to stop pornography or those writings giving bad influences on the morals of the people. All school newspapers were temporarily stopped, and so with school organizations. The themes of most poems dealt with patience, regard for native culture, costumes, and beauties of nature and surroundings. Filipino poetry was romantic and revolutionary. Bilingual education was initialized. Filipino songs dealt with the themes that were really true to life, like those grief, poverty, aspirations for freedom, love of God, of country, and of fellow men. Notable writers of contemporary period and their works. Manuel Argilia, How My Brother Leon Brought Home a Wife. Aurelio Tolentino, Kahapon, Ngayon at Bukas. Wilfredo Maria Guerrero, Wanted, A Chaperon. Jose Garcia Villa, First, Poem Must Be Magical, and Footnote to Youth. Alejandro Roses, Poems 55 and My Brother's Peculiar Chicken. Edith Tiempo, The Charmer's Box, Bonsai, A Blade of Fern, and His Native Coat. Francisco Arceliana, The Man Who Could Be Poe, Death in a Factory, and the Other Woman. F. Chenil Jose, The Pretenders, My Brother, My Executioner, and Poon. Cirilo Bautista, The Trilogy of Saint Lazarus, and Galaw ng Asoge. Nick Joaquin, The Sorrows of Vaudeville, The Woman Who Had Two Navels, and The Summer Solstice. Let's try a few items as practice exercise. Fill in the crossword puzzle with the correct words that are being defined in the two boxes on the bottom right and left sides. Write your answer in your answer sheet. Let's do this! Number 1, proverb. Number 2, religious literature. Number 3, epic. Number 4, chant. Number 5, bilingual. Number 6, Tanaga. Number 7, Jose Garcia Villa. Well done! Just because the past didn't turn out like you wanted it to, doesn't mean your future can't be better than you even imagined. Everything happened for a reason. God sustains our country and He protects us since pre-colonial era up to the present time. He never leaves us nor forsake us. Remember, you are essential. To wrap up everything that we discussed in this lesson, answer the following questions to check your own understanding. Number 1, how can these pre-colonial, colonial, and contemporary forms of literature be of use to your life right now? And finally, do you think you can still use the lessons they teach in your daily life? Explain your answer. Your homeschool work for today, worksheet number 1, 21st century literature from the Philippines and the world, first quarter. Let's call it a day. Goodbye and thank you. See you in the next lesson. Take care.